I said we should all just.
Call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for October 9th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Buckley?
Here.
Castro? Here. Klein?
Yes, here.
Maxwell? Wright?
Here.
Chair Doe?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Approval of the agenda. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? If none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
So moved by Buckley.
Second?
Second by Castro. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Approval of the minutes. We have the August 7th, 2019 minutes. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? And if none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
So moved by Wright.
Second.
Second by Buckley. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We also have the September 4th, 2019 minutes. Any additions, deletions, or corrections?
I move approval.
So moved by Klein.
Second. Go ahead.
Second by Buckley. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. This is the public participation portion of the meeting. Anyone who has anything that they would like to discuss or bring up that is not part of our agenda, we welcome you to the podium.
I have something that's on the agenda.
Okay, we'll have that pretty soon. Thank you. So with that, we have none, and we'll move on to new business. Our first item is a public hearing. The City of Dekalb initiated text amendments to Chapter 23 of the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, of the Municipal Code in relation to the adult use cannabis, and I turn over to the city.
Thank you. The state passed a law this past summer in June legalizing, it's called the Cannabis Regulation Tax Act. The act legalizes the private consumption of and possession of cannabis for Illinois residents aged 21 and over. The law takes effect January 1st, 2020. The council had a couple discussions at the committee, the whole level this summer, recently on August 12th and September 9th. And there was consensus that they were in favor of allowing recreational cannabis dispensaries in the city and modifying the current regulations for medical cannabis dispensaries to encourage these types of facilities. So the focus on most of the discussion was on the more of the zoning framework in terms of what zoning districts would the dispensaries be allowed in as either permitted or special uses, the maximum number of dispensaries, setbacks to schools, residential areas, and also the public health and safety factors were discussed. So proposed changes based on those discussion and changes in the state law, the staff crafted some amendments to the UDO, which is required to approve these changes, and we set a hearing for this evening. Just a little more background on the act. Does preserve local zoning authority and directly authorizes municipalities to prohibit these uses, or you can opt out and not allow these, but it was unanimous from the council that they want to allow the recreational cannabis sales in the city and to look at these regulations. So as mentioned, the cities have the right to enact reasonable zoning restrictions on these. There is several provisions in the state act that we're following too that do set some standards that we can't really lessen. For example, there's a provision: no cannabis business may advertise within 1,000 feet of a school, playgrounds, other sensitive areas to people under 21. So we're maintaining that provision. A municipality cannot ban a pre-existing medical cannabis dispensary. We don't have one. We did have one approved a few years ago, the zoning, but it did not go forward. The state did not license any in DeKalb County. So we do have some ability to restrict these types of uses and reasonable zoning standards. The state act authorized up to 500 dispensaries across the state, allows them to operate between the hours of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we can ban the consumption on premises of the cannabis. There's 6 types of cannabis businesses regulated by the act, and they're listed in the staff report. Craft grower, cultivation center, dispensary, infuser, processor, and transporter. The definitions are provided there. At this time, the council wanted just to allow and regulate dispensaries at this time. And in the future, we can take a look at the other types of cannabis businesses, and take a look at other communities, how they're dealing with them, but at this time, we just wanted to deal with the dispensaries. Let's first take a look at some of the zoning standards. What we're looking at is in terms of setbacks. The current UDO, we have medical cannabis dispensaries and cultivation centers allowed in the UDO with a special use in the industrial districts. That amendment was done in 2015. We did have one come through zoning-wise in 2017, a few of you may remember that. At Peace Road and Pleasant, they did not go forward. The state didn't license any in Dekalb County, and they had provisions in their ordinance that the zoning expired after a certain time if they didn't get a state license. So what we've done in terms of, so the current setback for medical cannabis to residential areas, schools, daycare centers is 1,000 feet. And there was maps, and up on the screen shows distance, various distances, buffer areas. What's shown here is a 1,000-foot buffer from those uses, and the areas in purple would be the areas where they would be allowed. So this is the current regulations for medical cannabis of 1,000 feet. As you can see, it allows pretty restrictive where they can go, and it's pretty much on the east side, south of I-88, our industrial areas. So with the recreational cannabis dispensaries, we're seeing those wanting to go in regular commercial strip areas, commercial areas, like our light commercial, general commercial areas. With 1,000 feet, that was not going to be able to happen, so we had to look at lessening that setback distance. In your packets, there's a map showing the 500. Obviously, that opens up some more areas, 250, 200, and 100. We kind of looked at 250. That was a suggestion, a recommendation from staff and the council. Currently, we have tobacco sales setback to those similar uses of 200 feet. The 250 does open up our major commercial areas, corridors along Sycamore Road, particularly West Lincoln Highway, a little bit of East Lincoln Highway. At this time, we're not going to allow those in the central business district dispensaries. In terms of zoning wise, then therefore we're going to have, as a special use, proposing they be special use in the light commercial, general commercial district, and also the light industrial districts. Just a little summary again of the 2015 amendments regarding medical cannabis, the regulations that we do have. Applicants have to have a pre-application meeting with staff, submit a plan, we're going to maintain that. Dispensaries, medical, are currently only special use in light industrial and heavy industrial, so we're going to add the general commercial districts and light commercial. Changes the 1,000 feet down to 250 feet. There's a separation of 2,500 feet between dispensary areas, proposing to match the state law, which is, I think, 1,500 on that. One of the provisions we currently have, we're looking to change, is the medical dispensaries can only be located in single occupant buildings, not in multi-tenant buildings. So we're looking to take away that. And the recreational medical can be located in a tenant space in a multi-tenant building, so there's no restriction on that. Parking areas, of course, must be well lit under camera surveillance. There's standards on that, which we're not proposing to change. There was currently several restrictions on signs, what they can say, and logos and all that. We're just proposing that the signs for these establishments meet our UDO standards in terms of signs, just like everybody else. Hours of operations, I mentioned, we're following the state law on that. No drive-throughs permitted, we're keeping that in. Of course, the security plan approved by our police department will be maintained. And deliveries, we'll just have to follow whatever's permitted in commercial districts or in state law. So in summary, the changes, what we're proposing is a term, cannabis business establishment. Be definition for that. That will cover both medical and recreational cannabis dispensaries. There'll be a special use in the light commercial, general commercial, and light industrial districts. 250-foot setback to schools, daycare centers, nursery schools, preschools, and then also academic buildings at NIU or residence halls at NIU. Also, a 250-foot setback to any residential zone district which contains a dwelling unit. So we do have some property zoned residential, like Kishwaukee Country Club, which is zoned residential, but there's no dwelling units on it, obviously, so it wouldn't apply in that case, only if it has actual dwelling units on it and zoned residential. Separation of 1,500 feet between cannabis dispensaries, that's per the state act, so we'll maintain that. Again, removes the requirement that dispensaries must be in a standalone building, will allow them in multi-tenant commercial buildings. Allow signage as any other commercial use per the UDO. No drive-throughs, keeping that. Smoking within a dispensary will not be allowed. Delivery of products may occur with any commercial establishment. Putting a limit of 5 at this time, dispensaries proposed. The state law has provision of 500 dispensaries statewide. They did announce the Department of Financial and Professional Regulations by the state, which is the department within the state that's going to regulate and administer this dispensaries and other cannabis businesses. Mentioned in a press release first of the month indicating they're going to accept applications starting in mid-December through January 2nd, and they'll be issuing up to 75 licenses by May 1st for dispensaries. There's a geographic component to that. The area where Dekalb County is, we're part of a Penn County area, north central, northwest Illinois, and through that first phase, through first part of May, there'll be 3 allowed in that area. You can see up there, it's the number 3 in the northwest Illinois. We're part of that area. Of course, the security plan approved by the police department that will maintain as we had before. The hours 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. found the state regulation, keeping the provision from the state act about the advertising cannabis-related products cannot be done. That's like a billboard or sign, not the sign of a business, but like an advertising sign or billboard. Cannot be within 1,000 feet of several sensitive uses, schools or parks, for example. And then at this time, we're prohibiting the adult use cannabis craft grower, cultivation center, infuser, processor, transporter, and the cultivation centers will be prohibited. So the specific amendments are in the attachment on Exhibit A. We do recommend approval of these. Been discussed by the council, and we've crafted these proposed amendments based on that. Do you have a city attorney here, Matt Rose, if there's any questions he can answer, or certainly I can answer for you too. That's all, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have one speaker form. If anyone else would like to speak, we encourage you to fill out the form and bring it up, but we'll open it up to anyone that would like to speak. So Dwayne Brown, if you could come up to the podium, state your name and address, please.
Dwayne Brown, South 6th Street, Dekalb. When Mayor Ray was mayor, we had this passed for a medical marijuana dispensary by an 8-0 vote in favor of it. And unfortunately, the state didn't issue a license. This was the company Justice Grown, represented by Jamil Taylor. I don't know if this is a different company or if this is a name change or what, but it was passed. Unfortunately, we didn't get the license. So here we're doing it again. We have people suffering from diseases, autoimmune diseases, such as chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, cancer, PTSD, other diseases, which this would be very helpful for. Unfortunately, they have to travel to Rockford or the suburbs. We have needed this for years. We don't have it. We're going through this again. I hope the state is prompt and issues a license this time. We have to think of our patients, our people that are suffering first. I mean, the state doesn't consider this, people who have traumatic injuries, who definitely need this, they can't they can't wait for, a license to be issued. They have to travel to get their medication. So I hope this passes, and I hope it's prompt this time. We certainly need it. I hope we get a recreational dispensary in Dekalb. I don't know, there's very few, there's, 72 in the whole state initially, and we need that also. Let's be prompt on this. Let's address the needs of our suffering patients. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to? Yep. If you can, I'll take that form from you. If you'd state your name and address at the podium. Thank you.
Hawkins?
Okay, yep, up at the, yep. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Don Hawkins. I'm the owner of Competitive Edge located at 700 North Peace Road, Suite A. So I'll be here in 2 weeks for your hearing on the medical marijuana license or dispensary that's being proposed to go into the north half or north third of the building that I occupy. So I have some concerns with regards to the city's approach on the marijuana laws and how restrictive it is. I understand their concern with regards to learn by others' mistakes, but I feel that there's a time essence here for the opportunity for people to get into this business to be able to be successful. If you go through the calculations of what marijuana sells for and the number of people that you have to have going through a facility that's a dispensary, you're going to find that you've got to have a lot of people walking through your door buying marijuana. With the price of application fees and the license, it's going to be a very risky venture on anyone's behalf, especially if you look at the population of DeKalb County, somewhere around 110,000. You have to take into consideration that the vast majority of those people that are going to be using marijuana are not going to be able to come to your store. So if you had 10% of that population as viable customers, that would probably be realistic. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is the craft growers. DeKalb County is an agricultural county. To omit a craft grower, I think would be very bad for the community. I would be interested in being a craft grower in the location that I'm at. I'm not sure if the distance between dispensaries includes whether it's recreational or a craft dispensary or recreational dispensary, but I think that needs to be considered also, not only by the city, but also by the state. The other thing that the city is indicating is that they're not going to require transporters for cannabis. And I think all of your medical marijuana dispensaries require transporter. And you're already considering removal of the standalone building for it. The separation was talked about, 1,500 feet, I brought that up. The adult use cannabis, here again, I'm advocating for the craft grower, not so much the cultivation or infuser or processor, but the craft grower and the transporter I think would be viable business for the city of DeKalb, possibly even for myself. The other thing that I would mention is that I am in contact with Springfield and our state representative, and I don't feel that the distribution of 3 recreational dispensaries in a 10-county area is sufficient when you drive 20 minutes to the east, and the 8 counties over there are going to receive 47. So that's basically where I'm at, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a little follow-up to that.
Yeah.
During the discussions by the council, we looked at these other 6 types of businesses, including the craft grower and transporter and these others, and they just wanted to deal with the dispensaries at this time, so we held up with these other types of uses in terms of getting the approval. We want to make sure we're, efficient at getting these dispensaries, the amendments in the code and ready so applicants can come forward. So, as I mentioned, we will take a look at these other types of businesses, in the near future. Once we get these dispensaries done and up and running, and then we can take a look at these others. So it wasn't intended to say we don't want these forever. Just for now, we just want to deal with dispensaries and just deal with that so we can get that through the process.
So Dan, with Mr. Hawkins' question about the different dispensaries, so are those, if we were to allow these, just hypothetically right now, are these all considered different types of dispensaries along with?
They're not dispensaries, they're types of cannabis businesses, so.
Type of businesses. So then would the setbacks between, would that be included with these?
The setbacks are between the dispensaries.
So it's specifically
Right.
between
Yes.
dispensaries, not between businesses?
Right.
Okay. So I hope that answers your question in that aspect. Okay.
So a dispensary could be a medical marijuana dispensary, or it could be a recreational dispensary?
Correct.
So the separation has to be 1,500 feet?
Only between
Between the
recreational by state law.
Only between recreational?
Correct, so if,
So
so
if the medical marijuana dispensary...
Can we have you come up and speak
Yeah.
to
Oh,
the,
sure.
so we can hear you recorded?
It's my understanding that the state is going to allow the medical marijuana dispensaries to tag on to their licenses that they have or they will be receiving to automatically qualify for a recreational dispensary.
they'll have the first crack, basically. Yeah.
Okay, and that's a great way to put it, okay? So they can run 2 businesses out of 1 location.
Correct. They can also have a secondary zoning, a secondary site, a medical cannabis that has a license also for recreational, could have that in a secondary.
Okay, so you're saying that a medical marijuana dispensary in, say, St. Charles, Illinois, who is already existing, can opt to have a medical dispensary in Dekalb, Illinois?
Well, they have you said that the medical one in St. Charles will have the ability to have a second site for their recreational.
Oh, okay, all right, so instead of being a medical, it would be recreational?
Correct.
Or they could operate it out of the same facility?
Correct.
Okay.
But if they wanted to have a secondary location, then it has, in the same town and in the same area, then it has to be 1,500 feet separating the two?
From the recreational.
The recreational.
Technically, it's currently, yeah, that's how the law
That's
is.
confusing.
It's unclear if they're gonna change that to say that, that there could be within, so let's, theoretically, right now, you could have a medical that is within 1,500 feet of a recreational, but you can't have 2 recreationals.
Within 1,500 feet of each?
Yes.
Okay. Can you have a medical and a medical within 1,500 of each? Or that's that's different at the moment?
No, that there is no setback restriction
On that one.
on between 2 medical dispensaries that I'm aware of, and then to make it even a little bit more confusing is that the state just there were some setbacks, as our UDO adopted those state law setbacks for medical in terms of where medical could be vis-a-vis residential and other uses. That state law just got amended to say to remove all those setbacks for any facility, medical facility that did not exist prior to 2019. So, for example, Dekalb doesn't have a medical cannabis facility, so if they came in now, their setback our current UDO setbacks would conflict with the state law as it is. So that's another reason to amend it. If that makes any sense.
I'm a little confused. Now, we're here tonight talking about recreational, correct?
We're talking about adding, we currently have medical cannabis
Right.
allowed.
So if this were defeated tonight, we'd still have the medical.
Yes, yeah. So we're adding the recreational cannabis and this modifying the medical cannabis too, so they're pretty much under
But
one
if we
use.
didn't pass this tonight, we couldn't have recreational.
No,
And it couldn't be tacked on to the medical without this being approved, is that right?
yeah, we currently have the medical cannabis regulations, which are
Right.
it's in
But
place.
you talk about adding recreational for some medical, but if we didn't pass this, you couldn't do that. Is that correct?
The intent of the law, I think I will say it's unclear, right? But the intent of the law is that a municipality could have a medicinal cannabis and yet prohibit recreational. Yet at the same time, the law also allows for the medicinal to have what I said, the first shot at a recreational license, and it doesn't require zoning approval from the municipality. So the state law says essentially that under each municipal zoning authority that you could prohibit recreational. So the intent would be to have if you had a medicinal, then that medicinal could not be recreational, yet the law is written in such a way to where you actually that medicinal could be entitled to recreational use. That is something that they are supposed to be cleaning up in November, to clarify. But I think the stronger argument is that a municipality could completely opt out of recreational, even if there was a medicinal.
Well, the first speaker was talking about we desperately need this to help various medical problems, but I don't understand why we need this for medical. We've got medical marijuana.
Yeah. There are some, I think there would be some amendments about changing where the setback limits for the medical, which would probably be consistent with new state law too, if you, this text amendment, but
One thing-
otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, there's something to discuss by the council. There'd be additional sales tax with recreational cannabis to 3% that the city could allow per state law. So that was seen as a benefit, and trying to, there's a need in the community for recreational cannabis. Additional sales tax, and if the city opted out, there'd be other communities adjacent to us that may allow those, and then we'd be out, because there's limitations on the number that are being allowed per the state.
Other than sales tax, is there any other benefit of recreational marijuana? All I've ever heard is, well, we need it.
Well, the state's
tax,
just-
But is there any other benefit?
I think the state's indicated that it's allowed in the state starting January 1st. So on a local level, I think we haven't heard any, from the public input tonight, I don't think we haven't heard anybody objecting to not having recreational cannabis, so.
So I'm going to go ahead and continue with the public hearing part. Is there anyone else who would like to speak that has not yet? We'll give you another chance before we close out this one. So since there are no more comments at the moment, commissioners, do you
Well,
have
I'm not in
anything?
favor of recreational marijuana, period, so.
But do you have any questions about
No, I
the
don't
changes
have any
in the
questions.
UDO or? Okay. Mr. Castro? Yep.
I have just a couple of technicalities, and I may have other questions later, but let's start with the technicalities. I happen to have looked as careful as I could, given the time constraints I had, for a definition of what an adult is. Is there a definition somewhere in here of what an adult is, or somewhere?
No, well, I think adult use is 21 years and older. Under state law, it's prohibited.
It is in here somewhere.
For being under. So I think there's a definition of an adult use cannabis business establishment.
At one point, I found a couple of things that were implied, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear. At least I hope if the city attorney believes that there is one, hopefully we can trust that.
Let me find it for you.
It may very well be somewhere else. That doesn't necessarily have to be part of this chapter in particular. You see. So the map, the 250, the one that is projected right now, which is a 250 feet buffer, and I just want to make this as clear as possible, Mr. Olson. The central business unit seems to be, if I'm getting my orientation right, purple in this map. This will be excluded in the final map. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
this is just a map showing the distance. It didn't relate to any of the particular zoning districts. So the central business district would be prohibiting
Correct.
recreational cannabis or medical.
Correct. So the third point that I wanted to bring for the sake of discussion is, and in this part of what I want to bring up, I'm also going to reveal a little bit of what I'm thinking about this, is a comparison of this particular set of restrictions, buffers, etc., compared to alcohol and tobacco restrictions, setbacks, etc. We had a conversation before the meeting. My understanding from our conversation is that the setbacks that we are proposing here, at least a recommended setback of 250 feet, is slightly more restrictive than the existing setbacks for tobacco and alcohol sales. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you remind me, please, what is the setback for tobacco?
The setback for tobacco sales is 200 feet to schools, residential, and there's a state law, 200-foot setback for liquor sales to schools. There was a recent state law, and the Dekalb did do an amendment to our municipal code that allows that to be waived per the liquor commissioner's recommendation and council approval, if that comes up. So that 200 feet setback for the liquor sales can be waived, but that's what our standard is.
Correct. And as I mentioned a moment ago, this reveals a bit of what I have in my mind with respect to this. I generally see it somewhat comparable. I know the comparison is not perfect, and to be explicit, what I mean is that alcohol, tobacco use is comparable to this marijuana use. Comparable, not exact comparison. I honestly believe that with the right guardrails, it can be legalized and could be provided in the city of Dekalb, and that is a little bit of my position with this, and that is why I asked about restrictions, setbacks with tobacco and alcohol sales. Having said that, I'll think about other questions if later I have the time. Thank you.
Dan, just a quick question. Has on-premise use been discussed? I see it says no smoking on premise, but I'm assuming that's cigarettes, as it is with everything else. Do we have anything that talks about on-premise consumption of cannabis?
That would be prohibited on premise can in these
Okay.
dispensaries.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just didn't see it.
It's the very last
Yeah, okay,
component.
that's cool.
That was per council direction.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, can a municipality, not DeKalb, that has a medicinal facility, then apply for recreational in this municipality?
Assuming that it's allowed in Dekalb, right?
And they would have to go through our procedures
Yeah.
for zoning, and, yeah. Wouldn't be allowed outright. If we do allow recreational, we'd have to follow our setbacks, our zoning procedures, and whatever's approved.
And that will give them first crack?
Yeah, well, you have to have a license to have, to be a recreational dispenser.
Right.
And once you have that, then you have to have zoning approval. So the municipality then has control over that to some extent, given the caveat of what I said earlier, that every medicinal dispensary that has a license has already obtained zoning approval. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So I think it would still have to go through our zoning procedures,
Right,
and
right.
they would not be given any.
Because there's none here
Right.
right now. So
Okay.
so any dispensary that comes here, medicinal or recreational, would need to have us, go through our zoning approvals and get a special use permit.
Okay. And so as we look at the 6 types of cannabis businesses, we're saying that we're dealing with dispensaries and that the others are not going to be allowed.
Correct, at this time, correct.
And wouldn't it be safe to say that a transporter is going to be inevitable with the dispensary? I mean, will the dispensary have to create its own transport, or will there be the ability to have a transport?
Well, they can transport, to a facility in the city, but this talks about the transporter's business location.
Correct.
Where they're located at. So if we wouldn't allow them located in the city, but obviously they would have the ability to transport cannabis to a facility in the city. It's where their home-based business is located at. Obviously, they would have to have it transported properly, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's the location of the business of the transporter where they're located. At this time, we would not have those in the city.
So if a dispensary wanted to hire a transporter, they would not be able to?
They could, yes.
They could.
Yeah, that transporter just couldn't have a zoning location in DeKalb.
In the city of DeKalb.
Unless they apply for a text amendment.
Yeah.
That was-
There was a couple of years ago, we approved a medical marijuana facility. What happened with that? Is it because they didn't receive state licensing that we didn't move forward?
Right, they had a provision in their rezoning, the zoning approved by the city, that they had to get a license by end of 2017, and the state wasn't issuing any for DeKalb County at that time, so that zoning expired
Okay.
for them.
All right. We talked about the signage and regulating. Are we regulating all PR? Can they do, other types of PR for their dispensaries?
Yeah, the sign reference here was signage on the property, the wall sign or ground sign. They can do other advertising. There's a provision regarding advertising within 1,000 feet of a school and park, relation to, billboards or whatever. But their own promotional marketing you're talking about? Yeah, they can do that,
Yeah.
whatever's allowed.
Yeah, it's high, their promotional marketing is highly regulated by the state, the statute, just, throw it out there if anybody wants to look
Yeah.
at it as,
Oh,
yeah. It's
well, I can say FCC licensed facilities, radio and television, can't accept it because it's
Okay.
not legal federally.
Yeah.
And we're federally licensed, so that wouldn't even be an issue.
So we just follow whatever the state law has on that.
All right.
So I meant to do this homework before I came tonight, and I didn't have time to get it done. Can you explain to me why City Council went with the 250 feet versus the 500?
I think it was suggested by staff as just kind of something to start with. The 1,000 feet, as you could see, was too much. It just took out too many of the commercial areas. So had to reduce that. We just looked at the different 500 feet, 250, 200. Once you get to 250, 200, that opened up our commercial areas where we envision these dispensaries wanting to go, which they want to. And I think we looked at the current, as Commissioner Castor was mentioning, the current setbacks we have for tobacco at 200 feet, liquor sales, state law at 200 feet. So we kind of went off of there and maybe got a little more restrictive since it's cannabis. So it was kind of based off of that. That's where we came up with the 250. So
Because I just don't see that big of a difference on the maps.
between
So
250 and 200?
I mean, some of the
Yeah, not
areas
much.
widen, obviously, and you include the CBD, or the CBD.
Yeah. If you want to,
Central, yeah,
you
CBD.
certainly could recommend 200. It's
Oh, no.
There was
I'm gonna
no-
go with 200.
magical into that. It was kind of based off the tobacco and liquor, particularly the tobacco setbacks.
That we've got now.
We just want to make that a little more restrictive for cannabis. But
Okay.
yeah, 50 feet's not a whole lot.
Okay, one more opportunity for the public to have any input on this. Yep. If you could state your name again, please.
Donald Hawkins. So as I listened to the conversation, I heard Mr. Rose make the statement that if someone wanted to establish a transporter business in DeKalb, he would have to go through the appropriate paperwork and appeals to do so. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that would apply to any of the other cannabis licenses that are available that the city is right now saying that they're not interested in pursuing.
Yeah, but assuming that the city council enacts what is proposed here tonight and prohibits, those forms of cannabis businesses for the moment, yes, you'd have to go through that text amendment process, but the burden would essentially be on the applicant to show why it should be allowed.
Why it should be allowed.
Yeah.
Okay, so to furthermore just clarify that, it would not be restricted to just the transporter business. Okay.
I don't quite understand the question.
Oh, well, okay, so there's a crafter's license that's available.
Correct.
Okay, there's a transporter's license that's available.
Yep.
Okay, there's a dispensary for recreational that's available.
Yeah, there's cultivation, so on
Or
and so forth.
cultivation. Okay, well, recreational, cultivation, crafter.
Yeah.
Okay,
So like if, for example, you wanted to do your own craft cultivation
correct.
and had your license for that and, you came forth and had a text amendment just to allow that craft cultivation, then the city could still prohibit all the other ones, but still allow the craft cultivation. If
Okay.
that's,
Well, it's also my understanding that the state is not accepting any applications, whether it's recreational dispensary, they're not ready for the crafters yet, and I haven't been able to find anything with regards to the transporter, so I would urge the committee not to pass until the state has finalized what they have, so we know exactly what we're dealing with.
Well, the state did mention cannabis dispensaries are going to start accepting applications, as I mentioned before, starting December 10th through January 2nd. So that's been,
Correct.
they set a time.
Right.
They have a number that they're going to.
But there was also a statement that was made that the state hasn't finalized everything, and they're hoping to finalize that sometime during November. Well, it's a long time between October 9th and the end of November and December 10th.
They're going back for, I believe it's called a trailer bill, or to clarify some things in November. As I understand it, shouldn't change anything that, I think it's just clarifying procedures a little bit more. But it's not, would, cause any major changes what we're proposing.
Well, in the last 3 months, the state has made a lot of changes with regards to the dollar amount for application fees and then the state license fees.
Yeah, the state license fees, that's not addressed in our amendments. These are just for.
Agreed, I'm just making a point.
Okay.
Okay. So, I would say to hold off.
Let me ask a follow-up to his. We passed this tonight. That doesn't mean that city council can't come back at another time and go, okay, now we're going to address the transport. Or, it sounds to me like they're not saying forever it's prohibited, they just want to deal with one thing at a time.
Correct. They want to
Okay.
deal with dispensaries now.
One at a time.
We can
Okay.
come back at any time like we're doing now, and we can initiate text
Revisit.
amendments to add craft growers
Okay.
or transporters.
Well, they're probably, the city can kind of follow the lead of the state as they're dealing with dispensaries first, and we deal with those, then we deal with whatever they deal with next, probably like that, right?
Yeah. Just kind of want to get ahead of the little bit here so we can be ready if we do get contacted about, is the city allowing these, and, we have an application for medical cannabis coming up, hearing on the 23rd for Peace Road, that indicated if they get approved, they'd be, entertained and be interested in doing the recreational too. So we do have other inquiries about if we're going to allow these or not. So we kind of want to have that in place so people can get through the process and we have it ready when January starts.
Another question. I don't know what outside research was done. I mean, I'm sure we looked at other states that have legalized recreational marijuana when we put these together. How do we compare to some of the other states? Are they about the same in zoning and text amendments and things like that?
Matt knows there are about other states. I know there's a handful of other states allow them. I'm not sure about the zoning
Okay, I didn't know if
standpoint.
we kind of went outside and looked at some of the other things and what's worked and what hasn't
I know with the
elsewhere.
medical, I think Illinois was one of the most restrictive, I think.
It
Yeah.
initially was, that
Yeah.
that has since changed.
Yeah.
And the Illinois state so I guess there's two components to your question is, the state legislation and then what are we doing on the local level,
Right.
right? We've looked a lot more at what other municipalities in Illinois are
Okay.
doing in response, because the
Okay.
Illinois legislation is unique in terms of, Illinois has what's called home rule, and it's unique in allowing what home rule units of government can and cannot do with it. But we've looked at what some other communities are doing in terms of, if they are completely opting out, if they are making it a permitted or special use, or if they're doing it in very small zoning districts, very small areas or not, or if they're welcoming out, if they're allowing these other types of cannabis businesses, or just this one, on-site use versus non-on-site use. That's the only one that we've actually looked outside of the state of Illinois at, and the decision was made that it would be better to not have on-site use. So, based on some of what has happened outside, but.
So we've looked at, communities, more in Illinois, obviously, in the area, and I did see that Elburn did pass on September 16th to allow recreational marijuana dispensaries. Their setback is 150 feet to schools and daycare centers, so according to the newspaper article here. So, and I did get their ordinance too, so I know Sycamore's recently had a discussion on that too. They're looking for public input, so some communities are opting out, others are probably granting similar type regulations, I would imagine, that we are.
Thanks.
Most are going to be probably special uses or conditional uses. I think that's in the state law if we want to
Yeah.
restrict any terms of how they're operating. It's got to be through a special use. The hour restrictions, that's kind of statewide. The separation between them, statewide. The advertising. So I can imagine others are probably wouldn't be too dissimilar to ours. The ones that do opt in.
Thank you.
So a question in the definitions area, would it, and this goes along with Mr. Castro's question earlier about what defines adult. Would it be worth having some type of a definition in
Of just pure
there?
adult.
Yeah, what adult use is?
Yeah, I mean, adult, it's this, these are largely the definitions from the state statute of defining the businesses, and the state statute itself says, prohibits the use of marijuana by somebody who's under 21. This zoning, the text amendment that you have here would prohibit, the use of marijuana by somebody that's under 21 too, or it doesn't allow anyone that's under, that's 21 years of age on a cannabis business establishment, for example. The state law already prohibits that sale or them possessing it.
So I'm guessing the enforcement of that is going to be very similar to the tobacco laws and the alcohol laws.
The
And,
drinking,
Yeah.
and this might just be my own question. I'm assuming that the, excuse me, smoking cannabis would follow the same state smoking laws, correct?
Well,
Where they have to stay so many feet away from a door, or?
Yep, so our Dekalb smoke-free ordinance, it still applies for cannabis.
For regardless of what you're
Yeah,
smoking.
So the state law says that your smoke-free ordinance, can apply to cannabis. So that's
I didn't know if that was anything we needed to
yeah,
consider.
we are looking at our smoke-free ordinance to make sure that that expressly covers cannabis, but I'm pretty confident that, I don't want to,
Although a lot of people.
I don't want to
follow
say
it, but-
outright,
yeah.
we are, that's under review right now, but the intent is to make sure that the smoke-free ordinance covers cannabis. Okay. Which I believe it already does, but we'll double check that, obviously.
Okay.
So just following up on that same comment, the consumption of cannabis, my understanding is that it can take more forms than just smoking it.
Yeah.
So I assume that, yes, we're going to review tobacco consumption, but think, I guess, creatively about the other ways in which cannabis can be consumed.
Well, so like, for example, the text amendment doesn't allow any on-site consumption.
And you're
So that
talking
can-
at the dispensary.
At the dispensary, right? And that, but we can't outright prohibit consumption anywhere in Dekalb because the state now says that if you're 21, you can do that. But you can't prohibit them from smoking in public areas under the smoke-free law. You can't necessarily prohibit them from eating a brownie in a public area necessarily under our smoke-free laws, right?
Yeah, and that would be outside the UDO, that'd be
Yeah.
different part.
That would be,
which
yeah,
we're
under our
not
rules of
addressing
conduct.
tonight, but.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any further public comment? Yep, come on up. If you can state your name and address, please.
Mark Robinson, 925 South 6th Street. So I had a question about the zoning, and you had mentioned, I believe, that the central business district will be removed from that? Being
Prohibited there, it's not removed, it's not in there now.
For what purpose?
For recreational medical cannabis
Exactly, like,
dispensaries.
you're going to prohibit it?
In the central
Establishment.
business district zoning, be
Right.
prohibited.
Why, I guess is...
I think the initial discussions by the council was that it's more appropriate for the commercial strip centers, or Sycamore Road, West Lincoln Highway, and at this time not prohibited them, not allow them in the central business district.
Okay, because in my opinion, this speaks to what Mr. Klein, I'm sorry, asked about, like, what recreational cannabis does for our community. If we have establishments in a district that we're trying to revitalize, it's a new industry. You're bringing people that would not necessarily be coming downtown if you're trying to create that culture. You don't want to put it on the outskirts. We're treating it like it's something that we don't want, as opposed to bringing it into the central part of our culture. Because you're talking about people that, well, I want to go, pick up a bag, and I go downtown, and while I'm there, I might visit, Poppy Seeds, or I might visit the Lincoln Inn or some other establishment that while I'm down there. It seems to me that we would be best served to encourage as opposed to push it away from our central business district.
Actually, my question I raised was, how does it benefit an individual? Not how much money we're going to make for the town.
Right.
How does the recreational cannabis benefit our individuals and our people?
Well, I would assume the same sense that our bars and our smoke shops do now, and our restaurants.
Well, I don't know that they're that beneficial.
But I mean, that's what I would say. I would say that, in the sense of having our central business district with trying to establish a positive flow in that area. This is a new industry, and I feel that it would be best served to kind of be in the center of what we're trying to develop. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And any further questions or comments from commissioners? Jerry?
So for the sake of some healthy debate here, I want to piggyback on that discussion a moment ago. And Mr. Klein, I think you presented a rhetorical question, which is, what else beyond money is the city interested in, or what is the value? And I would actually counter that by saying that recreational has a value, doesn't it?
Well, the other side of the coin is, in my understanding, a lot of people who are into the marijuana thing, it affects the driving, it affects legal activities, it's medical costs. I talked to a gentleman this morning who used to use marijuana. He referred to himself as an aging hippie, which he appeared to be. But he said, don't do it. He said it causes all kinds of other problems. So I think it does.
And I don't actually disagree with that. Those are actually excellent points. And in that sense, that's why I see the consumption of marijuana not that different from the consumption of cigarettes, nicotine. I mean, it creates a lot of health problems, and I don't think the solution is to prohibit it, but to put the correct guardrails around it, such that we, at a minimum, minimize whatever those negative effects are. And that's a little bit of what I think is the discussion that we're having. What are those guardrails? So one of them is the setbacks that we're talking about.
Well, I've lived in the county for 80 years. I've lived in Dekalb for 52 years. It's always been prohibited. And as far as I'm concerned, that was just fine. Now all of a sudden, something that was a criminal activity not very long ago, all my life. When I was in the military, it caused all kinds of problems. When I was at college, it caused problems. I don't see the point of changing that law now. They are changing it, but I just cannot understand what benefit there comes from that.
Well, the law has been changed.
Huh?
The law has
I
been changed.
understand the law has
So-
been changed. I think that was a mistake.
So we're dealing with, what the commission's dealing with is, do we allow dispensaries or not, locations in the city, and under what regulations? It's still going to allow people to, smoke marijuana in the city. It's not going to be illegal anymore starting January 1st. So understand what you're saying, but just focused on what is in front of the commission regarding the proposed changes.
I appreciate it.
As do I. Okay. If there's nothing further from the commission, I'll take a motion if you so choose.
I can do it. Based on the submitted petition and testimony presented, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of text amendments to Chapter 23 Unified Development Ordinance of the Municipal Code in relation to the adult use of cannabis as shown in the attached Exhibit A.
Motion's made by Buckley,
Second.
second by Wright. Any further discussion? And roll call.
Buckley,
Yes.
Castro,
Yes.
Klein,
No.
Maxwell, Wright,
Yes.
Chair Doe.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone's input as well.
Thank you very much.
Our second item is a public hearing. A City of DeKalb initiated text amendments to Chapter 23 of the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, of the Municipal Code to amend Article 5.09 CBD, in quotes, Central Business District, to make private parking lots and parking structures a permitted use. So I open to the city.
Thank you. You have a staff report in your packet. This is also a text amendment city initiated to the UDO related to parking lots. What we're proposing to add is private parking lots and structures when used as a principal use to list of permitted uses in the central business district. So right now, currently in the CBD district, public parking lots and structures are permitted use in the CBD if owned by the city. So it does distinguish public parking lots only. Recently, the city sold a lot at the southeast corner of East Locust Street and North First Street, next to the Egyptian Theater, to the Plaza DeKalb developer to accommodate parking for future residents in Plaza DeKalb. Notice in the UDO that private parking lots were not listed as permitted or special use in the CBD district. So proposed amendment to the UDO. So the report, let's take a look at where parking lots are currently listed as a use, permitted use or special use. Private, so parking lots is a principal use meaning they're the only use on the lot, it's just a parking lot, are listed as a special use in the neighborhood commercial and light commercial district. So the UDO beyond the central business district, when it says parking lots, that means public or private, doesn't distinguish between the two. Parking lots and structures as a principal use are listed as special use in the general commercial, office, research, industrial districts. Parking lots as a principal use are permitted in light industrial and heavy industrial districts. And then in our residential districts, parking lots as a principal use are listed as special use when located within 300 feet of the use being served. So they got to be within a certain distance of the use being served. So, parking downtown, of course, if you're in the central business district, you don't have to provide on-site parking there. That's provided by the public parking lots. So the private lots, we do have, Cornerstone has a private parking lot just directly south of the site, 40-space private lot that was approved as part of their planned development procedure. So it seems appropriate to allow in the downtown and useful to allow downtown property owners to supplement the availability of public parking lots with private parking lots and structures. So it is recommended that the CBD be amended to, as a permitted use, private parking lots and structures when a principal use. But I'd like to add, or suggest add, when located within 300 feet of the use being served. So make sure that the use being served is within a certain distance, so we don't get private parking lots, somebody just putting up a private parking lot in the downtown and not related to anything else. So, and just to note, that parking lot was purchased on First Street and Locust is within 300 feet of Plaza Dekalb. So the developer just wants some extra designated parking for the future residents there. So the sample motion proposed, recommend approval of the amendments for the exhibit. Again, just adding private parking lots and parking structures as a principal use when located within 300 feet, adding that as a permitted use in the CBD district.
Dan, can you clarify before I open this up to the public and the commissioners? So where is this lot at?
It's at the southeast corner of First Street.
Where the
Ice skating rink
was, the
there?
one here?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
thanks. All right. So
Yes,
I
that's a
thought
good
so,
way.
but as I was thinking,
Yes.
like, okay, I had my directions right, I'm pretty sure, but I wasn't sure. All right.
Yes.
So, thank you for that report, and I open this up to the public hearing. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item, we invite you to the podium. And there are two people in the audience that aren't looking at me, so I don't think they want to speak.
I'm part of the press, so I don't
They're the
think
press,
we'll
so-
talk afterwards, probably.
I just have to give them a hard time. Okay, so, commissioners, Mr. Wright, anything? I can always come back to you if you have questions. No?
No.
No?
Maybe. I don't have any questions, it's just a comment. If I were going to pay the rent that's going to be paid in those apartments downtown, I would not want my parking and my vehicle that far from where I lived. So I question, is it really gonna be for Plaza Dekalb, or are they gonna end up using Van Buren up until they can't park there at night and then doing something else?
Well,
Just an
the public
observation.
parking lots will have the restrictions on there, so I think the initial plan by Plaza Dekalb was to use the public lots with permits, the parking lots north of Locust, between there and the library, the
Okay.
public park, not Van
Yeah,
Buren.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for handicap, I think.
Yeah.
So there was no intent to use, because there'd be restrictions on the time, they wouldn't be able to park overnight and use that, so.
Good.
Just out of curiosity, the space, is it south of Lincoln Tavern on Lincoln? So there's a space there that is private parking, as you mentioned. That lot itself is part of what Mr. Papas owns?
It's Cornerstone.
That's Cornerstone.
Correct.
It's still private, the lot directly south of Cornerstone Building.
It is
40
private.
space, yes.
Okay. And I'm asking just to understand the overall context. I think there were discussions here about the possibility, the city trying to reserve the possibility of building multi-level parking spaces and stuff like that, wouldn't the city be limiting itself by selling these properties, which, I mean, not this one specifically, but probably the ones just south of Cornerstone? Wouldn't the city be limiting its possibilities by giving this up as private?
The parking lot south, we're not giving up the parking lot south of Cornerstone.
Part of it is private.
Right. This is not related to that.
No, I'm just talking in general. I mean,
Yeah, there is actually a parking agreement with the developer Cornerstone that in the future, if the city pursues a public parking or parking deck there, that we would get that private property, and then they would, residents would be guaranteed a certain number of spaces within that development, so.
Okay, thank you for the reminder.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
So would we have something similar for this property in particular?
No, it's not related to, it's.
No, I understand,
Yeah.
but we could have a similar agreement. I mean, just because future development may require
Yeah,
not the
that
right
wasn't
word.
part of the sale. The sale did not include that, yeah.
Oh, man, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I think the Cornerstone's a little different where that was right adjacent to it. There was a building on there and allowed the, ability for the city to have that building in the future to take over that and build a structure.
Correct.
If needed, and then reserve them certain
No,
number of spaces.
I perfectly understand that, but in the best of visions of the future, who knows where the Egyptian theater would be in terms of public and coming from outside of the city wanting to see shows. And here we have a commission that may be considering having a parking lot multi-level that is adjacent to the Egyptian theater. For example, I'm just
Yeah, and there's parking north of Locust, several public lots up there too. The city owns that would be, if the city chooses, we could build additional parking structure up there.
I'm just thinking that 20, 30 years in the
Okay.
future, who knows if we want that chunk of
Who knows,
space,
yeah.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
sounds good, thank you.
No, I have no questions.
Dan, I have a quick question. So private lots, I assume are maintained by whoever owns them. So with this, they will have some type of signage in there that restricts people
Yeah,
from parking in each spot or in the entire?
I assume they will have signage like they do Cornerstone. It's a private parking sign, permit only. They'll have to identify that. Yeah.
That was my only question.
Are there any inclusions in the sale that talks about what it's gonna look like? Will there be lighting, will there be landscaping, how is it gonna?
They had to comply. We actually did get a site plan
Okay.
on that, though it does meet the setbacks. There's 10-foot setback to the streets, 5-foot interior, and landscaping requirements. And that site does have some existing landscaping, kind of the perimeter, that they're maintaining, and then they might be relocating a few trees that are in the middle of that. So these have to meet our standards for parking still.
Good. Okay.
So,
Not sure what that was.
Something blow up?
yeah.
Or
Sorry, I
fall
just heard
over?
this noise, so for you in public who will see us on YouTube later. So I'm gonna close the public hearing. Any further questions or comments from commissioners?
No.
Okay, if not, I'll take a motion.
I move. Based on the submitted petition and testimony presented, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of a text amendment to Article 5.09.02 of the UDO to add private parking lots and structures as a principal use when located within 300 feet of the use being served as a permitted use in the CBD or Central Business District, as shown on the attached Exhibit A.
Second.
Motion's been made by Wright, seconded by Klein. Roll call, please.
Wright,
Yes.
Maxwell, Klein,
Yes.
Castro,
Yes.
Buckley,
Yes.
Chair Doe.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Reports.
Next meeting is October 23rd, 2 weeks. As kind of mentioned, we have a public hearing for 700 Peace Road for medical cannabis dispensary. And also public hearing regarding amendments to the annexation agreement and ordinance for the Chicago West Business Center. That's the large 343 acre piece south of the tollway, north of Gerler, west of Kriego, east of Route 23, to accommodate proposed development coming in. So that'd be the two hearings. At the two last council meetings, we had a couple approvals. Items the commission reviewed back September 9th. They approved the second reading for the Mooney property, Agora Tower. Council did. Then at the 23rd meeting, our last meeting in September, the council approved the amendment to where the Aspen Dental is and ATI Physical Therapy to expand the service uses there. That was approved on first and second reading.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Wright, second by Buckley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.